So we're ready to put the phone back together, and we've replaced whatever it is that we needed to replace. Now, before we actually put the board in, you just want to make sure that all the cables and plugs are clear of the board and that nothing's in the way, so when you go to put the board back in on the frame, that you don't cover anything or forget to move something. So you just want to make sure that your power volume cable, the authorized sticker, the battery, antenna, and charging connector cables are all out of the way. Now what we'll do first is we'll replug the Wi-Fi antenna cable onto the plug right here, and then we'll be able to put everything back in place. So it's a little tricky to line it up, but once you get it, you'll feel it kind of click, and then there you go. And then you can slowly and carefully kind of slide that under all the cables, and then make sure that all the screws line up. Now the one thing too is it's up here, the flash may get bound up and may get caught, so you just want to make sure that that goes into its proper space, and then the camera sits down as well. And then what I'll start with, I'll typically start at the bottom and kind of work my way up. And the screws we took out with the flat head, I'll actually put them in with the Phillips head because it's easier to start these. Just a couple of turns and you've got it secured, instead of trying to line up the flathead with the screw and then get it into its proper spot. It's just kind of more of a pain to do that. So what we'll do is line that up and just kind of slowly work our way up. Now the you kind of see the importance of making sure everything goes in its proper spot, because when you try to put everything back together, you can easily get mixed up. Now we'll move those feed lines, the board feed lines, out of the way to put that screw back in there, and then put the two screws in place for the antenna switch. And again, it helps to have a longer screwdriver just to get that tight spot up there. Now we'll plug in the feed lines onto the board, and again, this you can kind of do by feel, but you really don't need much force at all. Once they line up, you should be able to just get it lined up and plugged in. There we go. And then we have one more screw. Oh, this one will drop in place. Sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't. Just kind of get that one started. And then same thing, finish it up. Okay, and then we have the antenna plug down here. There we go. And I'll usually plug in the charging port first. Let me get this battery one in. It may take you a minute to get this cable lined up right in that little slot down there, but once you do, it should line in. There we go. Plug it. And then we'll get this top retaining bracket in first. And again, you'll notice that I can use my finger just to hold the screw and then use my screwdriver to pick it up, which just kind of makes it easier to free up a hand. So a couple of screws. You don't want to tighten it down too much, just a couple of turns. So if you need to adjust it, you can move it back and forth. And then we'll put the bottom one on. And get that lined up. There we go. The bottom one, and then retighten the top one. And the last thing we do before we put the LCD digitizer assembly back in is we will line up this little bracket for the flash. Okay, so let's get that going, and then we'll just hold that in place with our thumb or finger, line it up, a couple of turns. Again, we'll move that bottom one. Oop. Let me get this. We'll just hold that. Okay. Get that and that. Okay. Now we're ready to put the LCD back in. Now again, it probably helps to have that on the ground. These cables take a little bit to line up, and so really it's just a matter of starting with the most bottom plug and get that flat, and you'll feel it, and once you feel it kind of all lock in place, then you know you can move to the next one. We get that one right there. Same thing. When the first one's lined up, the second one should line up, no problem. So then you have that, and then last we have the camera. And this one may be the kind of the hardest one to get, because you have to get it inside that frame. But once you get it lined up, it should lock into place. And then I'll just use the tweezers to hold that guy, and kind of, again, just line it up in place. And once I see the screws line up and it's locked in, I'll just hold it, and then typically use the middle screw right here, just kind of get that, and then it holds it down in place. And then we'll get the other two screws here. Oop. And our last screw. Oops. Okay, once those are all in, we look, everything's good. Now to put it back in place, you want to make sure the camera is nice and flush and it's sitting in its, there we go. So once that's in there, we'll start at the top, and you'll notice the little grooves on top. There's 4 little grooves right there. See that right there? Those clips will actually go underneath the frame, and once you look and there's no gaps or anything, then you can just slowly kind of pinch the sides all the way up, and it should snap right into place. And then the last 2 screws that we'll put in are the pentalobe screws. and then you power the phone on and test it. And hopefully the part you've replaced ends up working, and you get your phone all back together.